to join us, so I just hit the record. Um, I'm hoping to have some time at the end where we can take questions, and you can put those in the chat. You can also follow up with me by email. I'm going to send you up a follow-up email that has the pre-service virtual teacher network site that has all the links. So if it seems a little fast, don't worry, you can always go back and look at the slide deck, look at the recording, email me, that sort of thing. But I will use your attendance over here in the chat box. And so then also too, what I'll kind of watch every so often, I'll watch the participant number. So because I know some of you are getting credit, some of you are getting this as an assignment. So if you say, oh, well, I'm just going to log in real quick and then bounce off, and I start seeing the numbers go down, then I might ask you to take attendance a second time at the end. So just some little classroom tricks. So I'm going to go ahead and share my camera just for a second so you can actually see that I'm a live person and not a talking head. And unfortunately, I'm still at the DE tonight, and our lights are on a timer, so it got dark at 6:30, and I was like, oh, this is going to be fun. So, but I am April Forts, and I am the state supervisor math consultant for the state of Iowa at the Iowa Department of Education, and we only have one, so I have the whole state. So it's a really big job, and I really take it really seriously, and I consider it a privilege and honor to do this job. And before coming to the Iowa Department of Education, I was a classroom teacher for 10 years. I taught middle school and high school. I was an instructional coach. I know many of your professors because they were either professors of mine, mentors of mine. I was on some of their research projects. If you have Eric Hart, I spent about 4 years with Eric back in like 2009 maybe to 2012. On some of his work, and so I've done a ton of different things across the state with assessment, curriculum, instruction, those sorts of things. So what made me leave the classroom and come to the DE? Well, the same reason I went from being a classroom to an instructional coach. I wanted to be in the best position to where I could help Iowa kids in math, because being a child of poverty myself, I understood that mathematics was my way to a better life. And it's so, so important that our students in the classrooms get that good math solid foundation. So last month, we did kind of an overview of some different resources. And so while we're still having people come in and register, if you haven't put your name over here in the chat box, please do so. And so after tonight, if this is your first one, I will be emailing this link out to you, and this is our website. It's not fancy. I'm more about function and not so much fancy. Some of you could probably help me make it a lot prettier. But so this is where we'll post things, and so there's a calendar here, and I list the participating colleges and recordings and registrations and the schedule, lots of things. Then over here underneath the Iowa Department of Education of Mathematics, I list some additional sites. So this is our state math page at the Iowa Department of Education. This is our Iowa Core for our standards and our standards for mathematical practices. This link here is a new website that we have this summer where we have the best of the best resources given our parameters, given the fact that we really look for things that are open source. And so for instruction, assessment, and PD, there's a link to my email. I've also recently started a math blog where I'm going to start explaining some of the resources and some of the things about Smarter Balance, which we'll get into a little bit more later on. And so I've just recently started that up. So if you go to the math blog right now, it's just like me trying it out going, oh, I wonder if anybody will read my blog, and that's okay if they don't. And Twitter, I've recently really explored Twitter a lot with Twitter chats and things like that. So I'm hoping to have some of those also. I love technology and all the different ways we can use it to connect and get that information out, because it's really hard to get information out even in a state the size of Iowa. And so I kind of was thinking, well, the pre-service teachers need to be learning about what the DE is doing at the same time the field. And when I say field, we're talking about K-12 education. So the schools out there, at the same time they're getting that information, it's important that you're also getting that information so that you can enter the field and you don't feel like you were unprepared. And I know your professors do an amazing job and they have so many things they share and teach with you. And some of these things you might be like, hey, she covered something and my professor talked about the same thing. And that's okay. Or, hey, I'm glad I knew about that because I might not have known about that resource. And there's so much out there. So this is just my effort to connect with you and to kind of get to know you before you go out into the field, and for you to get to know me, because then if you have a question out in the field, that's why I'm here. If you're like, nobody in your schools, you're like, oh, we don't know what to do about this. Well, why don't we contact April at the DE, and maybe she can help us out, because one of the things that I do is I connect with the other states and national leaders. And so I have access to resources that most people in our state don't, because it's kind of, you know, they pass it to the state leads and then we're tasked to pass it out to the field. Also LinkedIn, really haven't gotten into LinkedIn a lot. I have a profile in there, I have a bunch of friends, but haven't really explored that all too much. So still giving a few just some time to get in. It looks like we're at 35, and that's okay. Will this be monthly or quarterly webinars? That's a great idea, or great question. So right now I have it set up monthly, but if there is the demand, like if you guys are like, we'd like to learn more, or we want to take like maybe a side group and have a Twitter chat some night, I would be open to that. So I really look at my role here at the DE is like an instructional coach to the state. So it's my job to make sure you all have, whether it be your professors, the in-service teachers, or the pre-service teachers, to make sure everyone has what they need to be able to take the best care of our kids possible. So that's really, so right now it's monthly. We're gonna skip January because you all go on break and then come back. And so we're gonna try again at February 1st. I'll also be sending all of this out. So if you're like, oh, I didn't catch that, or I wanna go back and watch that, you can. If you didn't join us last month, you can also go in here and see the recording and the slide deck or slideshow. And so here tonight, I wasn't sure how far we would get this morning, and we really only got to talking about Claim 1. That'll make more sense in a little bit, but that means we still have several things to talk about with Smarter Balance. Another reason why I wanted to come to the DE is prior to coming to the DE for the last 4 or 5 years, I have actually worked for Smarter Balance while I was still teaching in the classroom. So I was an item writer for 3 through 5th grade, 6th through 8th grade items, high school items, claims 1 through 4, which will make a little bit more sense. For the formative, so that's the summative assessment side. For the formative assessment side, they have a digital library, and in that digital library are resources that have already been vetted through a process of other educators, and to where we would give feedback, and not everything that every educator submitted. So I have a couple of things in there that I submitted, that I created and submitted, and I also vetted quite a few things. Additionally to that, in the digital library, which we'll talk about more in the spring as we ramp this up across the state, but also in there are modules, professional development modules that are already made for us, which is awesome. And the high school Uber module on formative assessment that has 4 mini modules in there that could be used for PD was actually my classroom in Mount Pleasant. So I not somebody that doesn't know what you're getting ready to go into. I've been there, and I spent most of my time in the classroom trying different things, trying to get kids to learn, and just really being a positive impact on them. Awesome. So we've got a couple more, it looks like. So what I'm going to show you is the Smarter Balance site, and we have an Iowa course. Oops, nope, before that, sorry. I'm going to go back to the slide deck tonight so I can give you an overview before we dig into some things. So what we're going to talk about tonight is on the Iowa Corps website under summative, and we will be calling it Smarter Balance once all that legislation gets kind of finalized. So it's a little confusing because something that we definitely focus on with my position through standards and curriculum is we are all about the instruction. So yes, there's a lot of questions about the tests and the technology, but really my support I'm going to give you is a focus on instruction and how we can use the resources that have already been generated to help us do our job better. So one of the big things that we were able to do as a result of the work that Smarter Balance has done is to create this list of characteristics of the Smarter Balance assessment targets, and we'll talk more about that. A lot of our districts across Iowa have done work like power standards, priority standards, rigorous curriculum design, which is Larry Ainsworth work, some Marzano work. They've unpacked, repacked, all these different things, major, supporting. So one of the things is if all of the districts do it differently, we might not be all hitting the same mark the way we need to for our kiddos. Maybe one district was more rigorous than another district, and now we have an access and equity issue because we want all students in Iowa to really get the same experience regardless of the school that they go to. I'll show you these and how you can use those for instruction in a little bit. So for each of the grade levels, starting at grade 3, going through high school, we have these things that we call targets defined. And they were defined by Smarter Balance. And I can also show you the documents where there was a ton of people across the country that worked on this. They vetted it with over 200 different schools and agencies and feedback. And there's a 74-page PDF document that shows the research. So if any of you are like, oh, I really want to read those 74 pages, let me know and I can send you that link without a problem. Why did it start in 3rd grade? Why did Smarter Balance not start before that? Because that's what the RFP was for. That's what the request for pricing was to start at 3rd grade. So a lot of the states are now, it begs the question, well, what do we do for K2? Well, state leads get together 4 times a year, and so the last time we were together was last month in Minneapolis, and we get 5 minutes where we share out, and then we get an ask. So my ask was like, well, we have this stuff for 3rd through 8th grade and high school targets, assessment targets. What about K2? So they took a survey and other states had the same need. So we're working with the other state leads. We have a work team and we're hoping before the end of this year, we'll have K2 out in a similar format as this. These are all hyperlinks here, but for some reason it didn't show up. I don't know why, but you can click on these and get directly to each of these grade levels. Also, what's going to be available in this first column that I'm just going to highlight tonight, and we're not going to deep dive into them probably until February or March, is targets and claims, because I really want to talk to you and show you the documents that are already there so that you could, I don't know what assignments you might have coming up, but so that as you're going out and you're working on things, you can start thinking about those things. These are also live links, so you can explore those as well. Another thing is the Smarter Balance scoring. There is a standard-based grading rubric in there, and it's based around the assessment targets, which we'll talk about. And the achievement level and scale scores, you can explore those, but right now we're not pushing a lot of information out from the DE about those. And the reason for that is Smarter Balance test is actually free because it was written by a consortium, and what costs the money is the vendor. So a data company comes in and they say, yes, we're going to bid and we're going to give you the bid for, we're going to control that test. We're going to set up the software to administer it and to collect that data so that you have all that. And that's what costs all the money with the Smarter Balance test. So it's not actually the test. So some of these questions about grading and what do the scores look like and what do the score sheets look like. We don't really know until we get the vendor, and we might not get the vendor awarded until like March, April, May. I think the RFP isn't even going to go out till then. Okay, also, if you've never went in and taken a practice test, that's also a hot link there. So you can go in and take a practice test, and you can select on any of the different grade levels so that you can learn more about what that looks like. And is it more rigorous than you thought? Is it less rigorous? And so this slideshow is already up on the website. And so where I want to take you next is over to our Iowa Core page. And how you would get here, I'm going to back out for a second, is you would go to iowacore.gov. And this is also a link right off of the virtual network site. So over on the left-hand side, you can get to it. So if you went to here, and you could go to Educator Resources. Now first I want to talk to you about the Iowa Core standards. So I'm hoping that most of you have seen the standards. And if not, this is a great place to explore them. But you go into here and you would select mathematics, and then you would get to your different grade levels. And you can go into there and you can explore. You can get to the PDFs over here, a Word document copy. And I have previously already opened up a PDF because we're going to use that in a minute, but I wanted to show you where to get to that. And so I'm just going to back out. So this is where you get to the Iowa Core standards, and this is where we get to Educator Resources. And Educator Resources, so you go down and you say, oh, currently we have a mathematics, science, and social studies page, but we're going to focus on the mathematics. And so when you open it up, you'll see our first shot is the Smarter Balance Assessment. And if you go down here under summative, it's the hot link up here also, or down here. You go to summative, and this is where you're going to see those classroom resources that I talked about before, where you're going to have the domain, the targets, standards. So the difference between targets and standards, so standards are our standards and our clusters, and targets are what we use for assessment. And so you have those, and so these are the deep dive that I showed you over here, and then the Smarter Balance down here. And the practice is right here. You can also see the different calculators that are used because there's 3 different ones. So you might say, well, what's all this stuff? Well, this is a lot of PDFs. And if you wanted to know the one document where you would go to say, how did they do this whole process? Who worked on it? And you would find that under the content specifications. And if you were to open that up, you would see this is a 73-page document that I was talking about. And it lists who did all this work. And it lists who they collaborated with. And then later on, it says the research that they used. And it's really a nice readable format. I've read most of it, 73 pages of, it's a lot though. It's a lot to process and a lot to try to understand. Like, not that it's a lot to read, but it's just a lot of information about the work that they did, and they've done a really great work. What's exciting about this is we're going to have an assessment aligned to the standards, which means we're going to be able to service kids better in really using that formative assessment process and how that can impact our instruction. So what we're going to do is I'm going to walk you through a grade 3 targets defined. And I just start with grade 3 because it's the first one, not because I like grade 3 better, although they are pretty cute in 3rd grade little kiddos. So say I'm a 3rd grade teacher, or next year you're going into the classroom and you're like, I'm a 3rd grade teacher, what does this look like? So you go to the 3rd grade, and remember, these are targets. So this work is around the assessment targets. But in order to have really great targets and assess kids in the right way, we really have to understand the standards and what all that looks like. So what Smarter Balance did is they said, well, we don't have just the content standards, we also have the standards for mathematical practices. So what they did is they took all the questions that they wrote around the content standards, they called those claim ones. Those are claim 1 items or questions or question styles. And they defined a whole bunch of attributes that can help us with our instruction there. Then what they did is they said, oh, we still have the standards for mathematical practices, and there's 8 of them. And they didn't want to parse it out into 8 different groups. So they kind of looked at the standards for mathematical practices and they said, we're seeing 3 main ideas, or 3 big ideas. And those 3 big ideas were problem solving, communicating reasoning, and modeling and data analysis. So if as a classroom teacher, the only thing we're focusing on is the content standards, then this is only half of what the kids need. The other half is these 3, claim 2 through 4 together. So we talked about that claim 1 is content targets or content standards. Claim 2 is problem solving. Claim 3 is communicating reasoning. Claim 4 is modeling and data analysis. Tonight we're going to get a little bit deep into claim 1 because these are for each different grade level. This is a different pile of targets, and so we're probably going to have to talk about these on another night. So here under the claim 1 content standards, so we're talking content standards. So if we go over here to grade 3, so when we talk about our standards, this is our domain, operations and algebraic thinking, and we label it 30A. And then our cluster heading is represent and solve problems involving multiplication and division. So that's our cluster heading. And within our cluster, we have 4 standards. Now, the approach when you assess standards isn't by each individual standards. It's by target. So if I want to know that a kid knows these 4 standards, I'm going to say, can he represent and solve problems involving multiplication and division? If that student can do this, then he can do these 4 things. And I'm just using he as generic. It could have been a she. So, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that, because when we parse standards out and we try to assess every individual standards for a student, the mountain is so huge. And they actually did a couple of studies. And if they gave a 3rd grader a test to assess every single standard and all of that stuff, like individually like that, and they did what they call atomize it, then the test is like 13 hours long for a 3rd grader, 1 test. And I don't think anybody thinks that makes sense. 3rd graders would all quit school because they would be like, that's crazy talk. So we're going to go back into here. And so content standards are the clusters. Oops, I didn't mean to click out of that, but I did. And then assessment targets, and those are the same. So you'll notice over here, we have targets up here. It says A through K. So within A through K are all the 3rd grade standards. And so we've listed them over here. And we've received some feedback that this page is kind of a lot of text and maybe not easy to read. And we're actually probably going to take we're going to clean it up and make a facilitation guide or some sort of, hey, this is what this means, and here's a note, because to just put it on a web page, it's just a lot of information. So this page will be changing in the future. But as you look through here, you might say, well, what are these M's and these S's? M's are major and S are supporting. What does that mean? These are like priority clusters or priority targets, and these are supporting targets. It doesn't mean we can skip any of them. Here at the DE, we say all standards for all students. And the Smarter Balance Assessment contains questions for all the standards. So it's not like you can just pick and choose and say, well, what are 3 that I can make sure of? So under this one right here, and that doesn't mean M squared, there's just a footnote below, and it's a web design thing, and I said we're math people, that's going to look like M squared. So if I was a 3rd grade teacher, and I actually want to pull this up again real quick, I didn't mean to close out of that. And let me get down to 3rd grade here, because I want to be able to show you just the compare and contrast there. Okay, so there, we're in 3rd grade. Okay, so our domain, our cluster, we have the 4 standards. Notice we have some DOK levels here. And DOK levels, depth of knowledge, that's the cognitive demand. That's really like the teaching level. And so if we go back over here, we'll see, so represent and solve problems involving multiplication and division contains standards 1, 2, 3, 4. So over here, represent and solve problems involving multiplication and division, and we've got our 4. So they match, even though one we call a cluster, one we call a target, so assessment targets. So if I was a 3rd grade teacher, I could go into here and say, well, what does this look like? And when I go in, I will see, and I'm going to make this screen just a little bit bigger. Here's all the information if I want to know what's the depth of knowledge, what's the vertical alignment, what's the achievement level. So what's an achievement level? An achievement level is, how do I know if a student's proficient or not? How do I know if they're a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4? The evidence required, this is going to become super important, and we're going to, as a state, start talking about this come this next spring, because this is actually our leverage point. And I'll show you a little bit in this document what I mean by that, but this is super important. So what is that evidence that we need from that student during our instruction to be able to tell whether they're a 1, 2, 3, or 4? Are they proficient or not? Vocabulary, it's already there. Response types, what's appropriate, materials, arrays, blocks, different things like that. Attributes, maybe we only want fractions with even denominators. Depending on the grade we're assessing, a denominator of 19 might not be appropriate. So that's what we mean by attributes. These are navigate, like a table of contents up here. So if you click on it, you can get to any part. So I'll just show you. So it skips you down, so you don't have to scroll through this whole document. But this document, while you might think, oh my goodness, it's 9 pages for just Target A, this is actually probably a synthesis of probably about 30 pages condensed down. So we tried to put the needed information, but not too much information for the educator. And I worked with educators over the summer because this is like the 10th draft of it. So you'll see we have the content domain, operations and algebraic thinking. Here's our target. Here's our standards. Then we list the standards. So we have 4 standards. Then we get to the vertical alignment. And why the vertical alignment is so important to understand is, if I'm a 3rd grade teacher, I need to know, what did they learn in 2nd grade so that I can build on it in 3rd grade. And maybe I've never taught 2nd grade. Maybe I've only been a 3rd grade teacher. So if I've never taught 2nd grade, I might not know what they previously needed to know. Now, I will say that was not intuitive to me. When I taught high school and I started at the high school level, I wasn't like, oh, well, they should have learned this before. I was like, well, did they learn this before? Would they have learned this before? Why would they have? Where's that at? Then when I became a middle school teacher, I was like, oh, this is where they learned it. And so then it made a little bit more sense. Also, 4th grade, why it's so important that we have to get kids proficient, because come next year, based off of this target or this group or cluster of the 4 targets up above, they're going to need to be able to do these things. So the vertical alignment, very important, above and below. So you got to know where they've been, where are they going. Achievement level descriptors. As I talked about, this is how you're going to identify if a student's proficient or not. Are they a 1? Are they a 2? Are they a 3? So it gives the descriptors here of how the student can do this. Oh, the student's a 3, he's proficient, or she's proficient. Oh, the student can do this. The student needs a little bit more work. The student can do it at level 1. The student needs a lot more work. So that's how you would use these to differentiate your instruction and know which students do you need to work with more. So earlier I mentioned how important this evidence required was, and this is what I mean. So if I'm teaching this group or cluster of standards, these 4 standards, in order to know if they know those 4 standards or cluster, if they can do these 2 things in the evidence required, if the student uses multiplication and division within 100 to solve straightforward one-step word problems in situations involving equal groups, arrays, and measurements, quantities such as length, liquid volume, and masses of objects. And if the student determines an unknown whole number in the multiplication or division equation relating three whole numbers with single-digit factors within 100, if they can do these two things, then they would be proficient on this target. So we're really going to use that evidence required to leverage that. And why that's so important is it now becomes manageable. Instead of me thinking, oh my goodness, I have to teach all four of these standards to third graders, if I can get third graders to do these two big ideas, right? The evidence required. What are the students going to be able to demonstrate, show, articulate, multiple different strategies that we can use to get this information from our students, and that's where teacher autonomy comes into. You get to pick that. It's never the position of the DE to say, this is how you should teach. Everybody has their own style, and myself in the classroom, I had my own style. I would watch somebody and I could never like go in and just mimic somebody. Like I had to own it and make it my own. And so this is gonna become very important. Vocabulary. The vocabulary for this group is already done. The appropriate response types would be equation and numeric. That makes sense because we're talking about multiplication and division. You'll see the materials here. Could be drawings, graphics of measuring tools, scale, balance, measuring cups. And this is the attributes. So the numbers required to solve multiplication or division problems must be within 100 and use single digit factors. Well, that's because they're third graders, right? So they're still using single digit factors. It wouldn't be appropriate to give them something that had 2-digit factors. They wouldn't get that, right? Because that's not in their skills and concepts yet. So then under claim 1, again, that's a focus on concepts and procedures. And you'll see that there's the DOK level 1 there. And so it says students can explain and apply mathematical concepts and carry out mathematical procedures with precision and fluency. And so we put the evidence required underneath the standard, and you have various question types. So here's a question type, and then there's multiple examples underneath. Some of the questions, just there were more examples available than others in the information that Smarter Balance put out. And so sometimes you'll be like, well, how come there's only one example here? That's all they had in their material, and I just took what they had. And so then you'll also see the rubric here in the response type. So now question type 2. See on this one, we only have 3 examples. Question type 3. And then this is with different evidence requires. Well, this is a different standard. So every time you see this bold here, it's like, oh, well, this one up here was the 3rd standard and this is the 4th standard. So now you're seeing we have some different question types. And so if the students can do all of these, then, and you can get that evidence from them from up above, then you would know that they were proficient. So as I mentioned earlier, the claim 2, 3, and 4 are also on this page. And this is where, so the primary thing with a claim 2 is a problem solving. So this is going to be a problem solving question that uses the content in those 4 standards above. So it's going to be a problem solving question using multiplication and division, because that's what this is about. So it says Stephen is baking cupcakes. A cupcake pan has 3 rows with a place to put 4 cupcakes in each row. He filled 2 pans completely and part of another pan. How many cupcakes could Stephen have made? Enter your answer in the response box. You'll notice with this question, and this is what's so fascinating about this test, is so the student's actually going to type in a number, but there's not just one right answer, right? The student's going to get credit if he enters a whole number between 25 and 35 inclusive, meaning the answer could be 25 or 35. That's included in our set of solutions. And so the student can enter anything between that and get a point for it. So it really allows the student to be a problem solver and not to be, oh, there's one standard algorithm to get this solution, and there's only one right solution. There's multiple. So that's what makes this a different impact on instruction than maybe what it was before. So then here we have another one where Vera has 6 picture frames. Each picture frame requires 9 craft sticks. Craft sticks are sold in packs of 10. What's the fewest number of packs of craft sticks that Vera can buy to get the total that she needs? So that's an open response. So this is where your depth of knowledge is going to go up to that 2, 3, and 4 level. Okay, so we're talking conceptual understanding here. We're not talking just procedures and skills. We're talking conceptual. They really have to know what's going on here. So it's not just enough to teach the content. We have to teach thinking, because we want kiddos in our classroom to grow up and solve the problems of tomorrow, right? The problems that haven't been invented yet. That's why we need really great thinkers and that can come up with creative solutions. Here's another one. So these were all problem solving ones. Now this one is a multiple choice, and that's fine. Or it could be, some of them are single correct response, some of them are multiple responses. That's not uncommon in 3rd grade. Like this one could be a multiple choice or a multiple select. So that alone makes it rigorous, because they have to consider all of the solutions and not just one right answer. So this one in communicating reasoning. So this is constructing viable arguments to critique the reasoning of others. And so also, let's see, another single correct response. And then claim 4 is modeling and data analysis. So here, Tina has 4 packs of gum. Each pack has the same number of pieces of gum. Altogether, there are 60 pieces of gum. There's 2 parts to this question. Part A is make an equation to find the number of pieces of gum in each pack. Use N for the number of pieces in each pack. And part B is how many pieces of gum are in each pack. So they could get up to 2 points. So it's 1 point for the correct answer for each part. For part A, the student can enter the correct equation. And then for part B, the student enters the correct number. So this is all the farther I'm going to go with you tonight. I know that was a ton of information. Remember, we are going to be posting the recording, so you can go back and look at this. And I'm going to go ahead and back out of here. And all we really talked about so far tonight is, just to kind of summarize, is really how to use what the work that's already been done to help guide our instruction, so that we have that rigor and the standards in our instruction like we need to. So we know we have the content standards that we're going to teach, but then also those standards for mathematical practices. So important. Kids need to be talking, they need to be thinking, they need to be constructing viable arguments and critiquing others. That's really the 9 most important words in mathematics. Construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. If your kids do that in the classroom, they're going to be amazing, because we want them thinking, we want them giving feedback. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and pause there so that I can go ahead and I love that all 35 of you stuck with me, which is great. I'm going to go ahead and ask for feedback over here. What questions do you have? Maybe, you know, what information do you still need? So we have about 5 minutes. Go ahead and let's do a quick question here, just a quick poll. Type yes or no in the box if you've looked at the math content standards before. Okay, very good. So many of us yes, and some of us no. So definitely there's lots of things to explore. Yes, all mine have. Great. type yes or no in the box if you have seen this information before tonight, that you've learned already about the different claim 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so for most of us, that's a no. A couple have yes. Go ahead and type yes or no if you've looked at any of these pages before for any of the grade levels. Okay, good. So a couple people have. I saw a question up here. Okay, so let's see. Is the target synonymous with performance expectation and the next generation science standards? More yes than no. I'll say more yes than no to that. That's a great question, though. No, not on here. Okay, yes, and we pulled that out. So, so did you, final question, did you choose to come because you wanted to learn or you were required to? So you could just say, I chose or required. Okay, nice. Awesome, awesome. Thank you for the feedback. And before I let you go, so you will receive an email, and I'm going to try to get it out before I leave the DE tonight. You'll at least get an email with this website over here. And it's a lot of, so over here, you're going to get a link to the site here. And you're going to have all the information that you need. So you've got the calendar. This is our PD calendar of things coming up, who's participating, the recordings, the registration. I'll send the survey out to you. You'll have access to the slide deck. Here, this is how you get to the Iowa Core Standards, the instruction and assessment in PD. Email me anytime. I'm here to help and give you the best tools. And then if you're techie and you like to Twitter and blog, that would be great. And so I'm going to go ahead and let you out just a couple minutes early. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to being able to support you all more, and contact me anytime. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. And have good holidays, right? I won't see you till after the holidays, like February. So you'll get emails from me. So I'll keep you in the loop. Thank you.